Nigeria's headline inflation for July 2022 was 19.64% from 18.60% in June 2022. This indicates a 1.82% month-on-month increase. Johnson Chukwu, our next guest, is a financial affairs analyst and chief executive officer of Cowrie Asset Management Company. He now joins us to break down the issues thrown up by this steep decline in Nigeria's reserves and the spiraling cost of accessing the basic economic needs for Nigerians. Hi, Chief Johnson Chukwu. Thank you for joining us on This Day Live, the Sunday Talk Show.
Dr. Abbott, you have started with your high chief again.
But it's a statement of fact. Yeah, hi, Chief. Anyway, thank you for joining us. Okay, how bad is our situation? Headline inflation, 19.64%. Food inflation, 20.02%. Everything is rising. Either it's urban inflation, or it's rural inflation, or it is core inflation. How bad is our situation, and what does this portend for the average Nigerian?
Well, thank you once again for having me. Of course, we all know that our economic condition is precarious. You just mentioned the issue of inflation. In fact, there is also another school of thought that says even the inflation rate of 19.6% is understated. That if you adjust the inflationary, the consumer items basket, that the inflation rate could be much higher than that. But even if you use the 19.64%, it then means that an average Nigerian who earns income, whose income has been fixed for the past 1 year, that the capacity of that income to consume, to buy things in the market had been depreciated by about 20%. It then means that you can only buy 80% of what you used to consume just a year ago. That means if your income has not moved, your standard of living has, on average, deteriorated by 20%. That's what this indicates. And it then means that if, for instance, you are giving your children, if you have 5 children, you are feeding them equally, then it simply means that you can only feed 4 of those children at the same level that you were feeding them the previous year. This is just to put it more succinctly, so that we'll understand how the impact of a 20% inflation rate on the average household in the country. But beyond that, we're also dealing with several other factors. If you even look at that inflation rate and you consider the fact that food inflation, which is account for about 50% of average Nigerian household consumption, food items, given our level of development, given our level of poverty, food still accounts for about 50% of our average household consumption. The food inflation is about 22.02%, which then means that for an average household, their ability to eat the same quantity of food they were eating last year had been greatly diminished. And those are the things we are dealing with. So that's why I prefer to say this. We are living in a precarious economic situation. Of course, if you look at other variables, level of employment, exchange rate, several other factors, Nigerians have been going through tough times and rough times.
Well, there are some analysts who have said that, in fact, this situation could be worse than this, that this is official statistics released by the National Bureau of Statistics, that in real terms, if you check the reality on Nigerian streets, that this is even worse. What do you say to that?
Yes, as I said earlier, there's a school of thought that believes that the inflation rate today is understated because the basket of consumer items should have been adjusted in tandem with changes in taste, changes in demography over the past 5 years. I think the last adjustment was done more than 9 years ago, and now we should be talking about another adjustment of the basket. There are about 12 basket items that the Bureau of Statistics used to compute the all-item inflation. And there have been adjustments in the amount Nigeria spent on school, on education, the amount we spend on food, the amount we spend on transportation. Some of these items have gone up. That amount you spend on transportation has gone up. The amount you spend on food has gone up. The amount you spend on education has gone up. So if you adjust the all-item inflation against these baskets, you should have a higher rate of inflation, certainly above the current 19.62%. That school of thought is logical and consider the fact that, like I said earlier, we should have adjusted this basket every 5 years, but we've not done that. So if you adjust the basket, you're likely going to have a higher rate of inflation. Of course, an average household feels that the inflation rate is more than 19.62%, because if you look at the individual consumption items and you look at particularly the food items, you will observe that most food items have seen increase of more than 20%. Look at those factors that drove food inflation in July. Bread, the price of bread has gone up by more than 40%. Cereals, tuber, potato, yam, and other tuber. If you look at those items, their prices have gone up by more than 50%. Then you look at something like diesel, which is it has a direct impact on transportation costs. Diesel price this time last year, or July last year, was about 200 something naira per liter. We're talking about 764 naira per liter. So if you take the individual items, particularly if you weigh your household consumption against the individual items you consume, you're going to end up with your personal household consumption inflation rates far more than 19.64%.
Well, Chief Chukwu, one argument that is put forward is that this is a global crisis. Inflation is a problem everywhere. In the US, where the Federal Reserve has had to increase rates. In the UK, where rates have been increased repeatedly, virtually everywhere, including continental Europe. But why is it that when there is the tightening of economic policy in other jurisdictions, we see some impact? But here in Nigeria, nothing happens. As recently as May, the Central Bank of Nigeria, through the MPC, adjusted monetary policy rate. I think it's about 14%, that it is. But we don't see the impact. Why is it that those variables that change in response to monetary policy rates, in other countries don't seem to change here? What exactly are the fundamental issues with the Nigerian economy?
Okay, I will take to it from two perspectives. The first perspective is that the inflation rate is high in almost all the countries in the world. But I want to point out that inflation rate is high for countries that are importers of refined petroleum products, importers of crude, because part of the inflationary pressure is coming from increase in energy costs occasioned by the Ukraine-Russian war, and the increase in food prices are occasioned by the same war. The first thing you have to look at, which class of economic group does Nigeria belong to? We belong to a group called OPEC, that is Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries. We should be one of the countries that export crude to the world. And at this period, when crude prices have been elevated, crude oil producing countries are not witnessing the kind of heightened inflation we are witnessing. In Saudi Arabia, the all item inflation in Saudi Arabia is just 2.7%. Angola, which is the second largest crude producer in Africa, has witnessed a consistent decline in their inflation rates, a consistent appreciation of their local currency from about 620 kwacha per dollar to about 420 kwacha per dollar. So they've seen an appreciation of about 30% in their local currency because they are not a producing country. Russia has seen an appreciation in their reserve, appreciation in the local currency, and even have now started reducing interest rates. China is beginning to reduce interest rates because inflation in these countries are beginning to moderate. So why are we in the same group with countries who are importing crude, like Ghana, like US, UK? No, the question is that we shouldn't belong to that group. And one of the things I always say to business people, that if you're in a business group or in a business line where the business is witnessing a boom and you are witnessing a bust, there's a problem with your management. So we should ask the leaders of this country, what is the problem that we're not enjoying the boom that other oil producing countries are enjoying, where they are seeing low inflation rates, currency appreciation? That's one aspect of it we have to consider. And that should be the core of our discussion. But taking it to the other aspect of your question, why is it that tightening is not having the impact that it has in other countries? The challenge we have is that there is complete disconnection between monetary policy rates and interest rate in the country, because we don't have the transmission channel that other countries, more advanced countries, have. The transmission channel is always through consumption. And what happens is that when you increase interest rates, the implication that the consumers who have consumer credit, who borrow to consume, can no longer afford to borrow to consume. So they slow down their consumption. When they slow down consumption, the demand for goods and services slow down. And because producers will have a lag in reducing their production, what eventually happens is that the number of goods produced will be more than the demand for those goods, and price will begin to moderate. That's the classical logic of increased rates so as to slow down consumption and then slow down demand. When you slow down demand, because the more goods that will now be pursuing fewer demand, the market power moves to the consumers, and sellers are ready to sell at lower prices so that they can sell their products and prices begin to moderate. That is it. But we don't have consumer credit. So our consumption is not driven by the fact that I go to a bank and borrow to buy my food items and my clothing and all those things. No, that's not the case. So we live from our income, and therefore that transmission channel does not exist. And we must recognize that. Another factor that you consider classical logic of increasing rates to moderate inflation, it's increasing rates is supposed to stimulate savings, and which is also another factor of slowing down consumption. And because we are looking at the inflation rate of 19.64%, what is interest rate today? I understand central bank is forcing the banks to pay 4.5%. There's a huge disconnect between inflation rate of 19.64% and savings rate of 4.5%. So current disparity between inflation rate and consumption will only encourage Nigerians to consume more, because if you delay your consumption, you are going to pay more to buy the same item you ought to have bought at a lower price. So these are the factors why I have always emphasized this at different fora, that using monetary policy rates will not address our inflationary pressure. Inflation today is coming from importation of refined petroleum products, 2, depreciation of local currency, 3, high food prices occasioned by 1, importation of food, and 2, displacement of farmers from the farming belts. We need to address these sources of inflation to be able to moderate inflation in the country.
Okay, Chief Chukwu, Nigeria is entering a transition season, given the fact that the tenure of the present administration at the federal level is going to end in a matter of months. And many analysts say that, look, there should be certain priorities for whoever is going to form the next government of Nigeria. Look at the situation. The education sector is in crisis. The aviation sector is an issue. Emirates Airline is saying from September 1, it will not come to Nigeria. Turkish Airline is saying that it will reserve only 2 categories for Nigerian passengers. Air Peace has suspended its flights to South Africa. If you move away from there, there's also crisis in the forex sector, a lorry load of problems, compelling some analysts to say that it looks like the Buhari government is in recession. I don't know whether a government can be in a recession. It's only economies we are in a recession. But in any case, what do you think should be the economic priorities of the next government of Nigeria to address this cost of living crisis?
Well, I think we start from the short-term, medium-term, and long-term measure the next government should adopt. The short-term measure is to improve crude production immediately. And I'm happy to say that our engagement with my conversation with you at the last meeting we had at La Convention seemed to have resonated with government. You observed that I read while here in America that the young government is really engaging Tompolo to provide protection and security with the pipelines. That's one of the discussions we had yesterday at the last meeting, if you recall, Ruben. And one of the things we said is that government needs to quickly ratchet up crude production. And to do that, we must have some level of alignment between government objective or national interest and that of those of the oil producing states or the oil producing localities. And one of which is that to make sure that they are part shareholders or part stakeholders or benefit from the crude being produced in those locations. Using Tompolo may not be the classical solve all problem, but I think we need to engage people in those areas that produce crude. They must have some benefit from the crude that is being produced so that they have some losses to sustain if crude is not flowing through. So I think that's one aspect that the next government must address. We need to address that. We need to restore crude production. Ruben, if you look at our crude production in first quarter of last year, our average crude production was about 1.74 million barrels a day. In the first quarter of this year, it had dropped to 1.49 million barrels a day. That's a substantial drop. And that's why you saw a contraction about 26% in the oil and gas sector in the first quarter of this year. That's part of the reasons why our economy is going through these crises. Remember that oil accounts still have about 90% of foreign exchange earnings. So the short measure would be to address the issue of crude production. Second level would be to address the issue of subsidy on petroleum products. That may be a medium-term plan of the next government. Gradually modulate the prices to take out the subsidy and have a market-reflective pricing for refined petroleum products. The next level is to build an economic policy framework that will attract foreign and direct investment as well as local investment. Today, nobody is willing to invest in the country. You mentioned the issue of Emirates. I mean, why would anybody want to come and invest in for long-term purpose in a country? Well, even those who have just sold tickets and they can't repatriate their monies. And these are signals to investors, both local and foreign, that the climate is not good for investment. If you don't have investment in your economy, you cannot be productive. If you're not productive, you're not going to have improvement in your employment level. You're not going to have improvement in your foreign exchange position. And these are factors that the next government must. I think the next government must be all about economy. If we fix the economy, we're going to fix several things in the country, including the issue of insecurity. If people are employed, they are not likely going to go out there carrying guns and be risking their life just to kidnap somebody. But because they don't have any source of livelihood, so their life to them becomes meaningless, and they're ready to take any risk. So we fix the economy, and what we should be interrogating those who are asking us that they want to lead us in 2023 is, what is your economic blueprint? What do you have to do? And we have to look at what they must walk their talk. And for me, get crude production restored, that's short-term measure. To adjust the issue of pricing of refined petroleum products so that we can have local refineries, we can improve our crude oil export and production, and then we should be able to position ourselves as an oil producing country and not an oil importing country. And 3, have policies that will address the issue of investment environment, local investment, foreign investment, address the issue of insecurity. Some of that will require winning the heart of people in those highly volatile areas, as well as some level of gunboat strategy. So you have to combine those strategies. It's just going to be beyond the use of force. You also have to find a way of getting to warm up to their heart and getting them to buy into your vision of the future of Nigeria has. Today, Nigerians don't seem to have a common national interest. We don't seem to have a compelling need to protect the sovereignty of the country. We don't seem to have a compelling need to subscribe. We don't seem to have an object clause we can subscribe to as Nigerians. And that is leading a lot of people to be disenchanted, to be disillusioned. And some of them are either trying to check out, and we now say they want to jackpot, or they want to go into some other things that are unethical or sometimes insidious to the country's good health.
Well, thank you very much, Chief Johnson Chukwu, for joining us on This Is Live, the Sunday Talk Show. Thank you very much indeed.